Hey friends, another episode of Collecting Elton. I have been having this sort of honeymoon period all week over the RSD Caribou, which I have right here with me. I've done a video about how great I thought it was. Again, it's not my favorite Elton John album, but I'm so thrilled with the job they did of it and all the bonus tracks, particularly the previously unreleased stuff. I've been playing it several times and I'm really thrilled with it. Before I get going on this episode's topic, I want to point one thing out though that I mentioned in the last video, but I didn't connect the dots. There was a bit of a discrepancy between something that the Record Store Day sticker said, that was the sticker that was on this, versus what the Record Store Day website had claimed way back when Deluxe Caribou's release was announced a couple months ago, and as of this morning it's still on the Record Store Day website as though this Caribou was an RSD first release, meaning that most of you already know this, I'm sure, but for those that don't, a Record Store Day first release is a release where whoever owns the property of this, in this case it's Universal, is releasing this package through Record Store Day first, but down the line has the option of giving it a wider release if it chooses to. And that has happened with a few Elton John Record Store Day releases where the Record Store Day version might have been something like colored vinyl, or there might have been something unique about the packaging, but later on that release did get a wider release in some form and anyone could buy it. The sticker that was on that thing last week said RSD exclusive, not RSD first. And I'm inclined to believe the sticker more than I am the website. There have been mistakes on RSD lists published on the official website, etc. I've never known there to be a mistake on the sticker itself. So I don't know what the official answer is, but if I had to hazard a guess, I'd say that the RSD Caribou was an RSD exclusive, not an RSD first, which means there may well not be a wider release of this double LP package. So I just wanted to point that out. So this honeymoon period I've experienced over the past week has made me really kind of nostalgic about past Record Store Days. I didn't attend my first Record Store Day until 2017, and that was when Elton released, well, I'll get to it in the video, his Record Store Day offering for that year, which was the first year that Elton offered anything for Record Store Day outside of the UK. All told, I have in my research notes, I've noted 10 confirmed Elton John Record Store Day releases over the past 10-12 years, approximately, and one that I'm not sure about. Anyway, I wanted to go through this list and show you what I do have and account for all the Elton John Record Store Day releases up to present. Now, the very first one, or possible Record Store Day release, is the one that I'm not too sure about. And the reason I'm not too sure about it is because I haven't actually come across any sources that confirm, to my satisfaction, that this ever was an official Record Store Day release. This was in April of 2013, so it was released around the same time as Record Store Day that year. In the UK and UK only, there was a 7-inch release of Bennie and the Jets. And was released on a label called Secret 7-inch, and I've tried to learn more about Secret 7-inch as a label and as a project, but I haven't learned too much more than what I'm about to read to you here. So the Discogs website describes this very limited 7-inch release the following way, and note that it does not indicate that it was an official Record Store Day release. Secret 7-inch takes 7 tracks from 7 of the best known musicians around, so Elton certainly qualifies, and presses each one 100 times to 7-inch vinyl. We then invite creatives from around the world to interpret the tracks in their own style for every 7-inch, creatives meaning visual artists. 700 sleeves are exhibited and then sold for £50 a piece. You don't know who created the sleeve or even which song it's for until you have parted with your cash. The secret lies within. Hence the name of, I guess, the label and the whole concept, Secret 7-inch. No mention of Record Store Day. However, on the website EIL.com, one of these 100 and very limited 7-inch pressings of Bennie and the Jets did come up for auction some time ago. It's been sold, but the entry is still there, and this is their description. Elton John, Bennie and the Jets, rare 2013 UK Record Store Day single. See, they claim it's a Record Store Day release. Single-sided secret 7-inch single. Only 700 of the secret 7s were issued, and basically everything we just heard there. You'd think that, well, just go to the Record Store Day website and look it up. I've tried that so many times. The page on which they used to list, the master list for 2013, the UK list, is no longer there. If anyone happens to have an official Record Store Day list, UK list for 2013, I would appreciate it if you went to check that for me and let me know. For my sake and for anyone else watching, let us know whether a 45, Elton John Bennie and the Jets 45, pressed by the secret 7-inch project or label or whatever you want to call them, is listed there. All right, so that was 2013. In 2016, Elton released, again UK only, not one but 2 different discs for Record Store Day that year. And I have one of them. The other one I don't have, but I have something else to show you, which is pretty much the same thing. And, well, we'll begin with the one that's, as I said, pretty much the same thing. Again, this is not the Record Store Day version, but the Record Store Day version pretty much looked the same. For Record Store Day 2016, Elton released a facsimile version of the original UK the Thom Bell Sessions 77 12-inch EP, as it's often referred to. I've seen the Record Store Day version of this. It's really chilling, just down to even the typeface used for the speed indicator. It's so close. I'll take this out. Again, this is not the Record Store Day version. The Record Store Day version, they use the same paper sleeve. It's not a card or a board stock sleeve. It's an oversized paper sleeve, because in the UK, from the mid to late 70s, it was standard for 12-inch singles in the UK to have basically the sleeves to be these oversized, glossy, coated stock sleeves. They were like giant 45 sleeves, in other words. And on the back of the Record Store Day version, of course, we have barcodes and all sorts of markings that indicate that it's a modern reissue. But it pretty much looks the same. And just in case my fellow North American collectors may not be aware, the UK and other Rocket Territory versions of the Thom Bell Sessions 12-inch EP from 1979, the track order is reversed. So rather than Mama Can't Buy You Love, Three-Way Love Affair, and Are You Ready for Love, it's Are You Ready for Love, side A, and then on side B, it's Three-Way Love Affair, Mama Can't Buy You Love. The order is completely reversed, and that original UK sequencing is preserved on the 2016 Record Store Day reissue. So also 2016, the other Elton-related release that year, UK only, was a reproduction 7-inch of the original 1965 Bluesology 45 on Fontana Records, Come Back Baby, backed with Times Getting Tougher Than Tough. And this is the actual Record Store Day version. Unfortunately, I don't have any original Bluesology 45s on Fontana, but I do have this. I ended up getting mine a few years later on eBay after I learned about it. And that said, I have seen copies turn up in Canada on the secondhand market, like in brick and mortar stores. So sometimes I wonder if, even though it's marked as UK only, maybe there were copies that were circulated here in Canada. I don't know that for sure, but I know for sure that it was not available for Record Store Day in the United States. And I really like the sound of this 45. It was mastered at Abbey Road by Christian Wright, and it sounds fantastic. If you go looking for one of these, be aware though that this is not the only modern reissue of Come Back Baby on Fontana. There's also this one, and this is from 1991. I guess the Fontana label must have hit some special anniversary, and there was a box set that was issued in the UK only. I think it contained 10 of these reproduction Fontana 45s. I'm not quite sure what the selection criteria were, but they included Come Back Baby. I think if we compare the two, you can see that there is a difference in color and tone. This is the 1991 version. This is the 2016 version, both UK. You can also see that the 1991 reissue has a solid center, whereas the 2016 Record Store Day version has one of those die-cut sort of punch-out centers with the prongs. The original issue, real issue from 1965, actually had 3 prongs, not 4. So there's a bit of an inaccuracy there. And the other thing about this is that if you look at the label, the producer credit is Gus Dudgeon I don't know who made that error, but that's obviously a mistake. And that he did not produce Bluesology, I'm sorry. If you want one of these, they're still not terribly difficult to find online. I think that's probably your best bet. All right, next was 2017. And again, as I said before, 2017 was the first record store day where Elton offered something outside of the UK, and that was a very limited double LP version of 171170, and it was called 171170 Plus. And the significance of this release was that this was April 2017, and Universal was re-releasing a whole bunch of remasters, one of which was the original single LP, 171170. But for Record Store Day that year, we got this double LP version that included all the missing songs. For those of you not familiar, this was Elton's first official live album. It was originally just one LP, and it comprised songs from a radio broadcast that he did on November 17th, 1970 on WABC Radio, downtown New York City. And for years, you know, bootleggers would find private recordings of that radio broadcast or one of its reruns, and bootleggers would, you know, sell bootlegs containing these missing tracks. And long story short, you know, there was a fan demand that built for years. You know, when are we going to have a complete 171170? Well, finally, we got that in 2017. This was, however, a Record Store Day exclusive. So it was not something that has received a wider release since its Record Store Day issue, except for one track. Indian Sunset, which is a great performance of that song, was included in 2022 on the 50th anniversary Super Deluxe edition of Madmen Across the Water. So that's been released, but no digital or CD version has ever been released of this, or any wider release double LP version you can get. So if you didn't get one that day, then you missed out. And yeah, I have to laugh because whether you buy the single LP or you get the Record Store Day double LP with the extra tracks, both sleeves credit Clive Franks with mixing. And that's because the original UK album credited Clive Franks as the mixing engineer for this album. And if you bought an original UK version on DJM in 1971, you got what is now known as the UK mix, which was done by Clive Franks. However, the single LP reissue and the first disc of this double LP reissue actually features the American mix, the US mix by Dave Henschel. So, oops. Anyway, but that's, you know, that's just a little detail I thought I'd mention. And on a sentimental note, this was, as I said before, my very first Record Store Day, and I went to get this at a place called T-Bone's Records in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And that's a great old store I used to visit a lot. And I remember being there and getting it. It was the same year that the Beatles released Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane 7-inch with the picture sleeve, but it was the remix versions. So yeah, I got them both, and that's a great memory for me. Okay, Record Store Day 2018. We got this. Elton John versus Pinal, Good Morning to the Night. Now, this was originally released overseas in the UK, and I think parts of Europe too. You could get a vinyl copy of this. But the Record Store Day version, 2018, marked the first time that this was available on vinyl outside of the UK. So in Canada and the US, it was the first time on vinyl. These were limited to just 1,100 copies, so 1,100 copies of this worldwide. Glad I got mine. And I was in, where did I get mine? I was in Houston, Texas for Record Store Day 2018, and I went to a great place there called Cactus Music. And the Record Store Day version of this, unlike the original UK vinyl issue, which was black vinyl, the Record Store Day version was, well, they call it clear vinyl, but it has a kind of, it's translucent. That's what it looks like. Okay, so it's kind of milky white. It's not clear. It's milky white. And it's great. For those of you who are not familiar with what this album is, you might be saying, Elton John versus Pinal, what's that? Pinal was and remains an electronic pop duo from Australia, I think it is. And they received permission to take all of Elton John's not all of them, but well, his multi-tracks, at least from Empty Sky up till and including the Thom Bell Sessions material, take those multi-tracks and create mashups. So these aren't just remixes. If you've heard the Beatles' Love album, you know how George and Giles Martin were able to sort of combine songs and remix things in a way where they took elements of different songs and put them together. Well, this is the same idea, only now created entirely new songs from these elements. Like Black Icy Stare is a combination of Solar Prestige Gamelin, You're So Static, and Cold Highway from the Caribou album. And, you know, the title's taken from Cold Highway, and there are the backing vocals from Cold Highway open the song, but it's not a remix of Cold Highway, it's its own sort of new song. And when I heard about this back in 2012 coming out, I had my doubts that it was going to be anything I would really find interesting, and boy was I wrong. I was so wrong. Eventually I got my first compact disc copy of this in London, England, at F.O.M.O Music in the summer of 2014. But my greatest memory is being in Houston and getting this on Record Store Day 2018. It's great. Okay, 2019. This is one where I kind of failed. Well, I'll show you what it was. Record Store Day 2019 was this wonderful release. Live from Moscow, 1979, Elton John with Ray Cooper. They did performances in a number of different locations, but this album is a recording of, it was in May, I think it was May 28th, 1979, and it was a concert in Moscow. It was one of the Moscow performances, and the BBC actually broadcast it. So this album is that concert taken from the BBC broadcast masters. And it's great. This is an album that I've been bootlegged for years, but it's nice to have an official release. The bootleg version had the entire concert. This doesn't include the entire concert. You get, I'd say about 60 or 70% of the concert, but it's still well selected, and the sound quality of this official release is so much better than the bootleg version. This was limited to just 3,000 copies, but it was a Record Store Day first, so it did get a wider release, and that's the copy that I have here. I failed. Record Store Day 2019, I did not get a copy, and that's because I didn't actually go and try and get a copy. I was in New Orleans, I was staying at this nice hotel, and long story short, you got a really nice breakfast included in the price of the room for the night, and I'd been to this place before. They served really, really nice New Orleans breakfasts, and I just thought, I can't be standing in the dark. I'm not going to stand there at like 5, 6 a.m. waiting for this, you know, when I've got a nice breakfast waiting for me. I'll go later in the day. There'll be a few copies left for me. Well, there weren't. And I ended up going to 4 different places that day in southern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, looking for copies, and I failed. The Record Store Day version of this, the discs were clear vinyl. And this time, I don't mean milky white vinyl, I mean clear vinyl. And the wider release that came out a year later in 2020 was just black vinyl, okay? But that's okay. That's okay. These sound good. By the way, the quality of all these pressings so far, I haven't really been commenting on sound quality. They all sound fantastic. They were all done by, well, from 171170 up to now. They're all done by a lot of the same people that handled the general release, remaster, reissues. So it doesn't surprise me at all that these sound good too. One day I might get a clear vinyl copy of this if I can find one for a good price. But, you know, I can't cry. They actually, it was an RSD first, and a year later they did release it, not just on vinyl, I'll figure this out later, but also on CD. And the North American and overseas release of the double CD was in this sort of mini LP jacket. There was a release, an SHM CD release of this in Japan that actually, you know, used a conventional jewel case. And I hope to one day get one of those because I kind of prefer the jewel cases to these kinds of cardstock paper sleeve editions. Okay, 2020. Now you'll remember spring of 2020, the pandemic hit. So we did not have a record store day that year, the same as we'd had in past years. Some record stores held record store day later in the year, and you'll remember there was drop 1 and drop 2. And if I remember correctly, drop 1 was late August 29th. And in drop 1, Universal released this beautiful thing, the Deluxe 2 LP 50th Anniversary Edition self-titled Elton John. Now looking at it, you're probably thinking, well, it just looks like the 2016 reissue. What's so special about that? Well, I'll show you. For one thing, it was 2 LPs. So LP1 and LP2 had a gatefold, reproduced the original artwork with the lavender drop caps and titles and everything. But 2 LPs because the second LP contained outtakes and demos, and most of the material on this bonus LP was included on the 2008 double CD deluxe edition. But there were 2 tracks on here that were not included on that and had never before been released anywhere. And those tracks were the piano demo of Bad Side of the Moon, and I think Border Song was the other one. And you can only get them here. But the real thing, okay, well, for me anyway, I remember when Mike Esposito of the In-Groove in Phoenix, he did an unboxing video that year, and that unboxing video was what convinced me to go get one of these, because I was feeling kind of lazy again. I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll see what's left afterwards. You know, there's a pandemic, you know, I don't want to get sick, da-da-da-da. But then I saw him take out both these discs, and this is what we got. Check this out. Check this out. Yeah. Look at that. Actually, the way the lighting is hitting it here, it's showing up on the monitor here as a bit more red than it is kind of rose or a light purple. But it is just, I just can't get over this. This is so amazing. Oh, pressed by Optimal too, so it's guaranteed to sound good. And both records in this package are like this, are this translucent rose kind of vinyl, and it sounds good. You know, the first disc sounds as good as the 2016 remaster reach. The first disc is the Bob Ludwig remaster. It's almost as though it sounds even better on the translucent vinyl. There was, later that year, a 50th anniversary single disc gold vinyl version. It was a limited, but it wasn't a record store day release. Sometimes I'll come across collectors and even sellers or dealers of rare records, and they'll list the gold vinyl single disc as the record store day version, but it's not. The double LP translucent rose version, that was the record store day version. If you love this album, you don't have one of these, but you can get one, I'd say go for it. It's great. Record Store Day 2021, and that was June that year. At least up here in Canada, it was June 12th, if I remember correctly, and that I'd moved back to Canada by then. So this was the first Record Store Day I ever attended in Canada, and this one I got at Grooves Records in London, and this is the previously unreleased Regimental Sgt. Zippo album. If you bought the Jewel box set, okay, in 2020, it included 3 discs of very early demos and recordings, most of which had never seen the light of day before. And in there was what was intended, or at least envisioned, to be Elton John's first album. And all these recordings were produced, by the way, by Caleb Quay. And at the time of this album's release for Record Store Day 2021, a lot of articles referred to it as an aborted first album, and I think there's a bit of a misperception there, i.e. that the story was that the album had been completed, which it had been, and that Dick James was about to release it, and then at the last minute, for whatever reason, they decided not to. That's not quite what happened. Elton John and Bernie Taupin wrote a lot of what I think were actually really great songs early on in their partnership, and they were putting them to recording tape courtesy of Caleb Quay, who I think did a brilliant job of producing them. And among the 3 of them, I think they envisioned this possibly being an album, and they went so far as to cut a 12-inch two-sided acetate of an album that they thought might be called Regimental Sgt. Zippo. But it was never anything that Dick James seriously considered releasing as an album. And eventually when Caleb Quaye left Dick James' employment and Steve Brown came in and became sort of their new mentor, and he said, you know, this psychedelic stuff you're doing, you know, leave that behind. Concentrate more on writing from the heart. Don't try and sound like other people, which I don't think they were kind of. That's true. But, you know, and then they get stuff like Skyline Pigeon, and eventually all that leads to what becomes Empty Sky. But to call this an aborted album is a bit misleading. Think of it more as an aborted project. But either way, for the purposes of Record Store Day, it was finally released as an album. And this artwork is based on an original 1968 pen and ink sketch done by, I think, David Larkham. But it was colorized and processed and done all anew for the Record Store Day release. But here's the thing, these are all mono mixes, and that's what makes the Record Store Day release version unique. And not only was it a mono, but you get these flip back tabs, which have a sort of late 60s sort of quaintness about them. They remind me of the Garrett and Lofthouse flip back tabs that the original Parlophone Beatles albums are famous for. I think that's kind of where they, you know, whoever designed this sleeve took that cue. And you may say, well, now hold on, that's a little inauthentic. There were no original Elton John albums that had flip back tabs, so they're kind of cheating there. That's not really accurate. Yes, there were. This is a 1970, early 71 issue of the self-titled Elton John album on the Dick James label. And it has, well, it's a two-tab system, but it's flip-back tabs. And it's a South African pressing, the original South African issue. And I just want to give a shout-out, by the way, to Robert at My Groovy Collection. That's a YouTube channel who covers a lot of, you know, old records. And he is very, very knowledgeable about South African pressings of Elton John albums. And if you haven't checked out his channel, you do it. Just about everything I know about South African pressings of Elton John records, I've learned from him. So thank you, Robert, for teaching me all that you have. And for collectors, be aware, original early 70s South African issues of Elton John albums have flip back tabs. So what is left to say about Zippo? Yeah, so it was an RSD first. It did get a wider release. Okay, let's leave this here. In 2022, there was a wider release on vinyl, only instead of mono, it was stereo. And you can still get these. You can get them wherever fine records are sold. Should still be available. The wider release stereo version does not have flip back tabs. Unlike the Record Store Day mono version from 2021, the stereo version actually has an illustrated inner, okay, with lyrics on the back. The mono RSD version did not have that. And released simultaneously with the stereo vinyl was this CD, which is the official CD version, and on it you get stereo and mono mixes all on one disc. And it's worth having all three. But why does it seem like there were fewer than 7,000 copies of this Record Store Day mono Zippo? I don't know. You tend not to see them anywhere, and they were very hard to get. I remember waiting in line. That was the first Record Store Day I was ever at that had a really, really long lineup, and luckily I was there early enough. I think I was like 15th in line. And Grooves Records only had 2 copies of this, and I got the second one. They were handing out, actually, they were going through the line and writing down what people wanted and then giving you a voucher. And I remember when they gave me mine, they told me that's the second and last one. So, lucky for me I got it, because I did not see any of these in Record Store Day leftover bins. Record Store Day 2022, the Complete Thom Bell Sessions. Now, in the very first video I ever made for this channel, you may recall I did an unboxing of my original blue Rainbow Label MCA pressing of this. And I was excited to get it because those are extremely rare. But by then, I had already had one of these because this was released, Record Store Day 2022. And I got mine at Record Works in Woodstock, Ontario, which is a great store I've told you about before. This was remastered, and its release overseas marked the first time this was ever released on any format overseas, actually, because this was originally just an MCA territory only release. The Record Store Day version is lavender vinyl. It looks great, and I'm telling you now, it sounds great. This sounds better than my original MCA copy. It does. Now, a year later, 2023, this received a wider release. Same mastering, same tone, same everything, just on standard black vinyl. If you're a sucker for colored vinyl, look for one of these. Even 2 years later, they're not hard to find. I know of a few stores here in southwestern Ontario that still have copies of this sitting in their RSD leftovers bin. I don't think it was as popular as some of the previous Elton John Record Store Day releases, but it's out there, and I recommend getting it. All right, Record Store Day 2023. Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, 50th Anniversary Double LP Deluxe. I got mine at the Record Works in Woodstock. I think I got either their last or their second last copy. And it's basically the original Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player. It comes in the same gatefold sleeve when you have the lyric booklet. It's basically exactly like the 2017 reissue, only it's colored vinyl, both discs, and it comes with a second disc of what are called session demos. Now, the use of the term session demo, if I recall correctly, caused a little bit of confusion among Elton fans. The use of the word demo implied that these were, like piano demos, or, Elton and a piano, or Elton and tambourine, a bass, and a piano. These are actually just really rough mixes of the master versions of the album tracks. But in all fairness, the term session demo does apply, because if we define the word demo as a recording made for demonstration purposes, then it would and maybe should apply to these, because these were rough mixes, I assume, made at the time for demonstration purposes to reveal to people the progress of the sessions. I don't really know. All I do know is that they were interesting to hear. Some of them contain all sorts of elements that weren't used in the final mixes, and so they're interesting that way. But to be entirely honest with you, I played this a few times after getting it last year, and I haven't played it since. There are some things worth pointing out here. Basically, side 3, you get Daniel, Teacher I Need You, Elderberry Wine, Blues for Baby Me, High Flying Bird. You do get a couple things on here that are exclusives. Like there was a Sessions Jam version of the classic High Heel Sneakers that was recorded during the album. You get it on side 4. There was a very early version of Jackrabbit, which Elton and the band later re-recorded during the Goodbye Elbrick Road sessions, and that version was eventually released as the B-side to Saturday Night's Alright for Fighting. This is an earlier version done during the Don't Shoot Me sessions. So it's got some very rare things on it. But the real treat, as I said, the colored vinyl discs. And what you got was this kind of cherry red vinyl mixed with solid white. It was called, well, some folks called this propeller vinyl. I don't think it's a propeller vinyl pattern. It's more like a cherry red and white marble. And both discs were like this. And I think that looks really sharp. I do. These Record Store Day releases, even if you're not that interested in bonus material, and maybe it doesn't sound like the most compelling thing to purchase yet another copy of an album you already have several copies of, but these releases really emphasize just the joy of physical format. And that's one of the things that Record Store Day is all about. It's just enjoying albums as tangible physical objects we can put our fingers on and enjoy the ritual of putting the record on the table and seeing it in colored vinyl. When you see these things spinning around, it's such a thrill. It's the kind of stuff that streaming and playing from digital files just cannot reproduce. And then last but certainly not least was Caribou. And I'm not going to take this out and show you all over again because I have a whole other video for that. But what will Elton release next for Record Store Day? I don't know. Well, the pattern so far has been classic albums of his from the 70s that experienced some kind of anniversary, 50th anniversary specifically. So next year, what albums will be enjoying their 50th anniversary? Well, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Haired Cowboy and Rock of the Westies, both of them. It'll be 2025. So maybe we'll get a 50th anniversary deluxe version for one of those. Who knows? I don't know. But I'm really hoping, got my fingers crossed, maybe we'll get a 40th anniversary deluxe Ice on Fire. Yeah, I don't think so. Anyway, I think it's great. Record Store Day is great. I'm all for supporting it. I know that some folks can get really frustrated at the limited nature of Record Store Day releases, and that I can kind of understand. Like I wish that they would kind of distribute these in numbers a little bit higher as a way of decreasing the hysteria sometimes that ensues when people like me freak out and think, well, maybe I won't get a copy, and if I don't, can I go on with life? Which of course you can. You know, there's life outside vinyl. I know, I get it. But I wonder sometimes, would any of these have been released if the Record Store Day concept and marketing format didn't exist? Like, some of these are the kinds of records that might not have done very well at all if they'd received a wider release, like the Deluxe Don't Shoot Me. But if you release on Record Store Day and it's very limited, that creates enough of a fear of missing out anxiety. That release might actually sell more units than if you just did it as a general release. So if assuming that the theory I just described has any validity, I can kind of get why they would make these as limited as they do. So you got to appreciate it from both sides. Either way, like I keep saying, as Elton John fans and collectors, we are spoiled that we get what we get, because these are great releases, and they're very special ways of enjoying very special albums. If you like this video, please click like, please consider subscribing. I have many, many, many more ideas for videos that I'm going to be pursuing, lots more videos to come. Thanks for watching.